Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hello, Ryan. How you doing?
I'm good. It is bright and early here.
Yeah, you're sounding a little gravelly there.
Yeah.
Late night last night.
Well,
Late night in Ocean City.
Ocean City's it's senior week here, and
what's that mean? Well, what's senior week?
In my house, it just means there's a lot of old people. In the city, it means that everybody who just graduated is here celebrating their graduation.
Graduated. It's June. It's beginning of June. Don't they have to go to school through like July 4th?
No, they're here to work and party, and it's S week, and it's so funny because my senior week was in the year 2000.
Wow.
Which was 25 years ago. And on the boardwalk last night, I'm walking by and there's all these like signs like senior week. It's like, get your 50 milligram edibles here now. And I'm
my God.
Yeah, and
what?
I'm like, God, when I was like senior week, I remember we get in trouble like smoking a clove cigarette, so
now you said something called S week. What is S week?
It's just the senior week like slang.
Is that a known thing? You just tossed it off like the whole lot of this isn't a local Ocean City specific podcast.
Well, I think senior week, it went viral when Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed to the
interesting.
Supreme Court, because he spent some time down here and, may or may not have,
Yeah, his and his buddies is and Spazwack or,
Yeah, exactly. They were here for S. They were here for S week.
I didn't know that. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, I mean, we've got to elevate the conversation here today. We're not staying in Ocean City, Maryland today, wow. Ryan. We are going to one of the great cities. This is the requested, and it makes perfect sense. It's so weird we haven't done this episode yet. This is a first trip to Paris, part 1. I've learned from the Rome episode, we've got to, these big cities, we got to just split into 2 episodes. There's no way to be completely comprehensive. We're going to cover a lot of the big stuff in Paris today, and then we'll do a follow-up so that all those who are heading off to France this summer have us in their phones.
I mean, I think if we did 6 episodes on Boston, we could probably do 3 on Paris.
That's funny. All right, you're right. Same part 1. Maybe it's part 1 of 3. It's one of the great cities. You got Boston, one of the great cities. You got Paris. This is one of the great cities.
I can't think of any others.
It feels like we've jumped well into the Judy alert. In fact, this might be the first episode in the history of the Judy alert where it's not even necessary because you're actually hanging out with Judy.
I think it's the second time I've recorded an OC.
Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, but were we doing the Judy alert back then? I don't think we were.
I don't know. That's we'll get fact checked for that one. But
so how are things at home? Have you gone and explored any of your favorite local haunts as featured in our Ocean City episode? Our surprise hit episode.
Oh, that I hit up the dough roller for some pizza already. I've been to
Did you go to that haunted house? I remember there's a haunted house.
It's so funny. I walked by the haunted house on the boardwalk yesterday, and they've added a cool little sign that talks about Bill, I think his name was Bill Tracy, the designer who designed a bunch of those old haunted houses in the 50s all around the country. So they have a little sign for him now, which is nice.
Wow, a new sign. We might have to do a new episode. We got a new sign in Ocean City, everybody. And how long? What's next? You just did a big New York period. Now you're in Maryland, and what's next?
Well, I was supposed to be on jury duty, but
that's right.
Yeah,
that could put isn't the whole point of why you came home to go to jury duty?
That was one of the big reasons. Yeah, but I got out of it.
And you got out of it. How'd you get out of it?
I'm a good talker. I could have been a lawyer. I was thinking as I was talking to
You do say that.
Yeah, I do say that.
That's one thing you say.
Not like a lawyer,
No. You'd be like a Saul Goodman.
Exactly.
I mean, you're probably the most Saul Goodman person in my orbit.
I take that as a high compliment.
As well, you should. Yeah, I mean, he got to get an entire spinoff from Breaking Bad. I mean, he's doing something right.
Yeah.
And so did you actually have to go into jury duty?
No, I just I called in and I was like, I live in Bogota. That's far
and they were
away.
like, well, why can we see that you're calling from Ocean City?
I know. I thought I should have done this call earlier, but it wasn't a sophisticated operation, so we're all set. So
how long is it going to be till you're called back up?
I think it's you get off for a couple years, right? I don't know.
I have no idea. When I get called for jury duty, I go. I love jury duty.
I would love jury duty too.
I've been on a jury.
Well, that's cool.
In fact, it was it was when I was at one of the WPP agencies, when I was at Ogilvy. It was great.
Ogilvy let you, nowadays they wouldn't do that. They'd be like, get off that jury.
No, I mean, it was great because, juries, it doesn't start till like 9:30. Then there's a lunch break. Then you're out at 4:30. It's really good hours.
So after Maryland, I'm heading back to Latin America.
Straight from, so nowhere else in the U.S.
Nowhere else Washington D.C. But
well, that counts.
That counts. Yeah.
Are you gonna have time to do anything touristy there?
I'll probably do something touristy there. Yeah.
I'll be anxious to hear what you feel about the atmosphere in DC. I've had some friends visit who say the air feels different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know why that would be. But
listen, we're a Big Ten podcast, so we absolutely will not. If you notice it, you will not mention it on the air.
That's true. That's true.
So you're going to get the express from Ocean City to Bogota with a brief stopover in DC.
Yes,
that's the traditional air route to get to Bogota, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I might even fly out of DC and not New York. I haven't, like something like that.
And right, we're recording this a touch early because I'm on the cusp of getting on the plane to Seattle, doing a few days in Seattle, and then it's off to Alaska.
You've been traveling a lot lately. I feel like
I've been on the move. Springtime puts it in your feet. You just want to get out there and get going. And yeah, this summer is filling up. I've got London coming. I've got a little time in July. It's going to be great. And the Alaska trip, though, the Alaska trip. I'm hitting a bunch of Alaska that I did not do on the first trip there, which is very exciting for me. And I'm excited to see in the forecast that it's going to be 85 here in Boston, and it's going to be a slick 40 where I'm going.
40. That is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got my rain pants. It's going to be killer.
I'm super excited to hear about it, and I hope you post a couple pictures.
Yeah, well, I'll be taking a lot of pictures. Plus, this is teeing me up for the long sought after episode of traveling with kids. I have not felt that I've taken a substantial enough trip to really have the insights there, but this is going to be a real rude awakening. The 3-year-old, we got the 5-year-old. We've got a 6-hour flight each way. God willing, no delays. We've got a tiny little cabin on a cruise ship, and it's going to be the full parenting vacation experience, I think.
Well, I know the audience has been waiting for that. I sat next to, not next to, like a baby was like 3 rows in front of me. So I feel like I could do an episode on that.
I'll tell you the thing I'm struggling with right now is what to pack for food, because the airline options aren't going to fly, and you can't really bring peanut butter on the plane, and you don't want something smeary and messy. You don't want something that's going to get crumbs everywhere. It's herring, but it's got to be something that the kids are going to eat. It's this is going to be the exciting content.
Yeah, those first class Alaska meals are not what they used to be.
It's not first class, but it is Alaska, and smoked salmon is not what the kids desire. Well, Ryan, knowing that we both have trips to get to, I think it's important that we dig in here and first get off to Paris. It's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan. Well, as always, again, this is part 1, so we're going to do the major highlights. This is like the first big thing, like even if you were only in Paris for a long weekend, that you have to do. So we should start with what are our when have we? What are our backgrounds? And I actually don't know this with you. I think you've gone. I'm sure you've at least passed through heading somewhere else, but have you actually spent substantial time in the city of Paris?
Not substantial time. I've been to Paris twice. Once for work, back when you and I worked together. We worked on the Francois Hollande campaign.
I missed that you worked on that. I didn't know that. I was not on that work, unfortunately, and I did not. I had forgotten actually that you got that trip. But yeah, oh man, now I'm feeling real. I'm going to hand over the mic to you.
Yeah, no. So I was there, and we worked in the Socialist Party headquarters. And
you must have loved that. Don't say that too quiet, too
yeah.
loudly into the microphone. We got some listeners who don't love that.
I thought it was really funny because they smoked so many cigarettes and they drank so much coffee.
So happy.
I remember getting there at office like 9 a.m. is kind of just getting going, and then like, everybody arrives at 10 a.m. We start talking, and then they're like, "All right, let's grab a quick coffee." And I'm like, "Okay." So in my mind, we're going to be working while we're doing the coffee. Like that's not in anybody else's mind, we're going to be hanging out. So it's like by 11 things get going. So that was my experience there, and then I went back, for like a long weekend. So I don't really like a couple years later. So I haven't been to Paris in a decade.
Wow. Okay. And did you have time to do a lot of the touristy stuff, or was it more I mostly there for work. So did you just have to kind of enjoy the ambiance of the city?
Yeah, more ambiance, less serious tourism. So I'm going to be learning a lot from you today for my trip to Paris.
Yeah, that's huge. You really got to get this on. I mean, for the fact that you've spent, months in Romania and you've never spent a long weekend being a tourist in Paris, that's a big thing. But, I actually think it's it feels that you've at least spent enough time that you understand that this is a city where the atmosphere of culture, of romance, of light and love, this is the Paris that people dream about, and you do feel that in the air when you are there.
Yeah, it's there is such a unique vibe to Paris. The city of lovers, the city of lights. All these things like it does kind of like rise to those names.
And of course, as a Broadway, you must have had Les Mis playing in your head as you walked around, I'd imagine.
Playing in my ears, I'm sure. I probably listened to every cast album, while I was there.
I remember the strong musical cue I had in my head was from Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame.
That's another one. Yeah,
it was Jason Alexander singing about how Shirley Esmeralda was going to fall in love with Quasimodo, which whoever had that idea for a Disney musical, I hope got fired promptly, because that's one of the weirdest concepts I've ever heard.
I actually really like the show.
It's not bad. Yeah. It's not bad. It's got really good music.
Yeah, it does. It's really adult.
It's really what?
Adult. It's like an adult kind of musical.
Oh, adult.
Yeah, don't you think?
I thought you said a dog. I thought you kind of a dog of a musical. No, it's solid. It's a solid musical and a weird story. Well, listen. So Paris obviously going to be a bucket list place for many people to go, and there is a very tried and true and well worth it tourist path that you should be taking. So I want to give a couple of overviews of the physical geography of the city and give a tip on where I think you should be staying. So the city is kind of the equivalent of boroughs, I guess, if you want to, but at least neighborhoods, is the Paris arrondissements. And there are 20 of those that are basically their own communities within the broader greater Paris area. And the setup is very interesting. It feels very French to me that they spiral out from the city center, so that the further outer ring that you get, picture like a snail shell. If you started in that very middle, you are in the first arrondissement, and then a lot of the tourist attractions are going to keep you kind of in the first 5, and then as you spiral further and further out, that's when you're going to have to take the subway or an Uber or a taxi to get out there. And the reason I bring that up is because I remember on previous trips I was like researching restaurants and bakeries and cafes and things I wanted to go to, but I would many times you can tell from their addresses which arrondissement they're going to be in, and then you can determine, okay, you know what, this one's actually going to be a bit of a hike from where I'm staying or where I'm planning that day. So as a tourist, and especially on your first trip, you're really going to stay in that central area. And like many great cities, you think of the River Thames in London. As Ryan mentioned, the Boston trilogy, you got the Charles River here. We have the Seine River that goes right through the center of Paris. And I always think it's helpful to have a river because that's going to tell you your directions and it's going to keep you kind of grounded on where exactly you are in the city when you're wandering the streets.
I do really like a central river in a city. I do think it's important.
And the two kind of interesting bits about the Seine. Well, first of all, I think it's going to be fresh in people's minds because, of course, last year's Olympics had its whole opening ceremony set along that entire river, and then the Olympians themselves were actually like on boats. The parade was right on the River Seine, so it should be fresh in everyone's mind, and you'll know if you've watched that footage. This is sort of the grand area where you're going to see wonderful architecture, and you could fill entire days just walking along those beautiful paths on the river. And they actually did a tremendous cleanup effort of the river in preparation for the Olympics. You might remember there was sort of a like, will they be able to put the athletes in the water, the swimmers in the water?
Yes, I do remember that. I don't know if I would want to.
Well, I'll tell you who it wouldn't stop is RFK Jr. That guy loves going for a dip in sewage-filled waters. But two of the oh God, please don't send any more reviews. I know you don't like that joke. I'm sorry. There are something that I don't think people often associate with Paris, but we should call out just for navigational purposes, is that there are actually two islands in this central area. One is the Ile de la Cité, which is the city island, and then the Ile Saint Louis. And the Ile de la Cité, and again, I didn't take French, so I do apologize for my American pronunciation of these things.
Oui, oui.
That has two of the biggest landmarks that you're going to visit. One is Notre Dame, the Grand Cathedral that has recently risen from its 2019 fire, and then a smaller chapel that I can't recommend enough called La Sainte-Chapelle. And this is a precious Gothic chapel that has these gorgeous stained glass windows that rise far above you, and it's one of the most beautiful churches I've ever been into. So you'll certainly be spending time there. And I will say right from the start, you're obviously going to have a lot of hotel options in Paris. It's a great city and all the chains are there, and there's high end, low end hostels, Airbnbs, all the different versions you can get. But I have found that bed and breakfasts on Ile Saint Louis are a little bit of an undersung hidden secret, great place to stay because you are minutes walk. 10, 15 minutes walk from all of these central locations, but it has a real quiet neighborhoody atmosphere where, people actually live here. And yes, you're near the tourist spots, but it doesn't feel loud and overwhelming. So I've stayed there several times. And I guess, Ryan, I actually jumped so quickly in that I didn't say the reason I've stayed several times is I did go to Paris as a tourist for about a week several years ago. And then I used to go through for work 1 to 2 times a year for a span of 3 or 4 years there. So I have actually had a lot of time to do the major attractions and then even some of the secret hidden attractions, which we'll get in on future episodes. So Ryan, obviously the place we have to start, the biggest landmark, the thing everybody's going to have to at least go see, if not go up on, is the Eiffel Tower. So even though you were there for work, safe to assume, I would imagine from Hollande's offices, maybe you could even see it.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid the Eiffel Tower. It's pretty magical and, a remnant of a World's Fair. Which you and I have been promising for, 200 episodes to do an episode on. So maybe I'll work on that.
Listen, we're just getting to Paris, okay? So we could be... Listen, we had to get through that double episode of analyzing all the pictures and passports before we got to a Paris guide. I think we know that's obvious.
You got to know what's in your passport before you go to Paris. So the Eiffel Tower, incredibly cool. Can you take an elevator all the way up, or is it like a stair situation?
So you didn't go up in it?
No, I didn't go up in it.
Okay. So I have to say, I think it is completely reasonable to make a decision, especially if you're on a limited time schedule, not to go up in the Eiffel Tower. I think you can take it in from the ground. And as you say, it was built as sort of this ornament to the city for a World's Fair, the 1889 World's Fair. There are 18,000 pieces of it that rise up, and at night it has this beautiful beautiful light show that you can, see from the ground. You can look up at the lights. If you want to go up, yes, there are observation platforms at 3 different levels on the tower as you go up, and you cannot take a single elevator all the way up. You do have to switch elevators. So some very practical tips here are: 1, you should absolutely reserve your place before you go. Do not just walk up and try to go on. This is like one of the great places to visit in the world. So there will be lines and you will waste a lot of time waiting. And if you decide to go up, when you get up to the platform where you switch elevators, you should immediately go to the next elevator. You shouldn't waste your time. You're going up anyway. So the view you're going to get from your lower platform is going to be even better on the higher platform. So just get in line, look for the shortest elevator line up, and switch over there. And, as you'd expect, if you're a person who craves views and Instagrammable videos, sure, doing it from the Eiffel Tower is going to be one of the better experiences. But also keep in mind, you're not going to be able to include the Eiffel Tower in it because you're on it.
But you can get a good selfie afterwards.
Sure, exactly. So my recommendation, I did not personally go up into it because there are plenty of other places to get views. At the time I went, this is no longer an option, but in Notre Dame, you could go up in the towers. That is something that they have not reopened in Notre Dame right now. So if you're craving views, Eiffel Tower is going to be the place to do it. And, everybody's going to be looking for that picture if they know you're going to Paris.
Absolutely. No, I can't think of a more iconic building. It's slightly more iconic than the Knoxville gold ball that they got for their World's Fair. So,
oh yeah, and how about the remember? God, who is it that has the temple to Athena?
Isn't that Nashville?
That's in Nashville, yeah. And that was for like I don't think it was for a World's Fair. I think it was for like a Southern fair, and that thing was supposed to be torn down after a year, and it's been around for like 50.
Can you imagine if they'd taken the Eiffel Tower down? That would have been one of the great mistakes. And they're like, all right, we're done.
And actually, when it was built, it was meant to be taken down. It was not going to be this permanent structure. And I was actually reading a story about how the creator of the Eiffel Tower very cannily added radio antenna to the top in order to make it functional, not just purely ornamental. And that was part of the decision to keep it alive, was because it actually did have this transmission purpose.
Yeah, I'd be curious to watch that big French epic Eiffel that came out a few years ago.
Oh, sure, yeah.
About him, that would be fun. His name's like what? Gustave.
I believe that's right. And his last name is Eiffel, so he did a good job.
Yeah.
So that's, covering off the Eiffel Tower. I think people are going to understand what it looks like, And again, it's actually a very good place finder as well, like the river. If you're studying the maps, because the streets, like any old European city, they can be hard to follow. And so knowing where you are with the Eiffel in one place, the river in another, can really help ground you if you're navigating your way on your own. Now, of course, Ryan, one of the other great places that you're going to have to visit, and we're going to save Catholic Corner for a little later here in the episode, but the Louvre Museum, literally the largest single complex museum on Earth. So it is the largest single space on Earth that functions as an art museum.
That fact surprises me a bit because of things like the museum in St. Petersburg, and so this is a huge museum. Wow.
Huge museum, and as a result, is going to take most of a day if you really want to soak it in. I remember when I visited, my friends and I limited it to about a 3-hour visit, and still it felt like just this scratching of a surface. So the 2 recommendations here are prioritize, decide what it is most important for you to personally see. And you're going to have to decide that by studying beforehand what's in it. I'm going to give you some of the highlights here. You're going to be familiar with some of these paintings. I mean, some of the great paintings of all time are in the Louvre. And, it's very hard to avoid crowds. Even if you play the games of going later in the day, the tourists are going to come in earlier in the day. It, like the Met Museum in New York, is just going to be packed most of the time. The Louvre, it's even above that. that you're not wasting a lot of time trying to walk in. Even then, massive, massive crowds. And I think we all probably have seen on social media that room where the Mona Lisa is, and how, you're lucky if you get within 10 people back of it. And the Mona Lisa is surprisingly small.
I've never seen the Mona Lisa in real life, but I have heard that it's small, and that it is just insanely crowded to get to.
I personally think that it's funny. I remember in Mexico City, the Our Lady of Guadalupe. You know how they have the people mover in front of it, and you kind of get on,
yes,
and they move you through to admire it, and you kind of have your,
you can't stop. Yeah.
30 seconds in front of it. Yeah. I personally feel like that's something that should be some of these most famous artworks, because something like the Mona Lisa, I mean, you do not have a chance of getting an intimate moment with it, just to be totally frank. And it is put behind several, because it's been very popular, especially for climate activists, to go in and splash paint or food on these great paintings. The Mona Lisa did that happen, but because of the barriers, it was safe. But it's obviously the great iconic piece of Western art, so it's got all the protections you'd expect.
There's a really cool movie that came out in the early 2000s called The Dreamers, about these three students in Paris in the late 60s, and there's this iconic scene where the three of them run through the Louvre together. And even if you don't watch the whole movie, that scene is really thrilling, and it just gives you an idea of how huge and epic this museum is. And obviously, they filmed it with like no people in the museum, so it's cool to watch.
Yeah. So beyond the Mona Lisa, again, when studying what art you'd like to see in here, if you ever took a basic art class, a lot of the things you studied are going to be there. I mean, there's Da Vinci's, there's Titian's, anybody you could name among the great artists is represented somewhere in the Louvre. And there's also great ancient works. So you should really choose, what is particularly to your taste or to your liking. One thing that I think benefits us, Ryan, and for anyone who didn't grow up Christian and doesn't know some of the most popular sort of Christian lore and stories, I feel that that's pretty key to understanding a lot of this great art. There's a famous painting of Saint Francis receiving the stigmata, which is the stigmata is where Catholic saints receive a hole in their hand, which represents where the nails went through Christ's hand on the cross. These are just things that
mine always itches.
I find this is going to sound crazy, but if you actually get diaper rash cream, very good for the stigmatas. You know what? I should actually include that on the traveling with children episode, because you get ready access to diaper cream for your But the St. Francis receiving the stigmata is one of the great paintings. And because so much is painting, Europe was heavily Christian at the time, and so the great artists who had their patrons wanted great Christian art. Often the church was paying for this art, and so you can avoid needing to know some of these Catholic. There are two particular paintings that scale, but also because I just so appreciated how detailed and evocative and interesting I found them. One is the wedding feast at Cana, and Cana is the wedding feast where Jesus famously was asked to turn water into wine, and it is this absolutely epic scene full of different personalities and people, and Mary is present and Jesus is present, and you could spend hours just studying this one epic painting.
Yeah, this is quite a painting, and I love the perspective of it. Often we see Jesus like sitting like long, the table kind of long, in the sort of Last Supper style, and this is much more like classic dinner party sort of vibes.
Yeah, classic dinner. Yeah, it's a chaotic and interesting scene.
Yeah,
this is like Renaissance busy town right here.
And Jesus, I didn't know that Jesus had the best seat at that wedding. Like, was he the main guest? He's with the groom.
Well, listen, if you're turning water into wine, you become the main guest. It's sort of the trick of it all.
That's better than alchemy.
Yeah. Again, this is just a story that you're going to want to be familiar with before you actually, you don't want to be Googling what is the wedding at Cana while you're standing in front of the painting, because it's going to be crowded.
I bet Rick Steves has a really good podcast on the Louvre you can download while you're there.
Well, yes, of course, because this is Europe. Rick and his guidebook do have, and his guidebook is what I took. I took his walking tour through the Louvre, and that's always a guarantee that you're going to see the most famous stuff and be able to navigate it very quickly and efficiently, which I always appreciate. The second one that I remember really prompted a lot of study for me, because I didn't really know the history of, I didn't know a lot of the history of France and its empire and Napoleon. And there's a very grand painting called The Coronation of Napoleon. And this is where Napoleon is made emperor by the Pope. And this actually did happen, and did happen within the Notre Dame Cathedral. So it's a great way to tie together some of the sites that you're going to see, because obviously you're going to go to Notre Dame before or after you see the Louvre on this trip. And when I tell you this is an epically sized painting, it is 30 feet by 22 feet. And it is by an artist named Jacques-Louis David, which obviously a very French name. He's the first. He is known as the first painter of Emperor Napoleon because of this very painting. And it is larger than life. It certainly gives you that sense of like grand propaganda that surrounded Napoleon and his ascension. And again, with the Catholic lore around it, there's something very powerful about forcing the Pope to crown you emperor. And it tells about the complicated relationship between French power and Roman power of the church.
But and in that shocking moment in that ridiculous movie and in real life, though, he grabs it out of the Pope's hand, the crown, and puts it on his own head.
That's exactly right. And this, by the way, we all have Pope fever recently. This is Pius VII. You'll be seeing that.
You don't
Pius
need to tell any of our listeners the order of the popes.
No, they knew. And while we're not trying to give the encyclopedic walking tour of the Louvre, which would be fun to do sometime in the future, another place that left a very strong impression for me, and of course, Rick Steve's tour is also going to bring you here. There's the famous statue named Winged Victory. Winged Victory, and its full name is Winged Victory of Samothrace. And this is that winged statue where they're missing the arms and the head, and it's just the torso, the clothing, and then wings beyond it. It's familiar to anybody who's seen it. It's a Greek masterpiece. This is
like the Nike thing, right?
Exactly. Yes, it's a statue of victory of Nike, and it's named that Winged Victory of Samothrace because Samothrace is the name of the island in the Aegean Sea where it was discovered in 1863. And there's something I actually think it's maybe more beautiful for the fact that it's incomplete. It's so evocative, and the place that they have created for it within the Louvre is at the top of this grand staircase that's called the Daru staircase. And so you sort of ascend up to the statue as you go towards it, and so you do have this sense of flying and ascension. And so it's really it's one of the grander framings of a piece of art, and I don't think you especially don't see that in such a crowded museum for single pieces like this, but it really is set apart and creates a very memorable experience.
I didn't have any context to this. I had seen the piece before. I recognized it. I had no idea it was at the Louvre, though. This is an incredible piece. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think especially while it looks complete. I mean, not complete because it's missing those appendages and head. But while it looks like this was found in a single piece, notable that this is actually 110 pieces that have been put together to create the image that we know of it today.
I wonder how much of it is real, and how much of it they had to,
my understanding is that a very good part of it is real.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, 110 pieces, a lot, that ranges from big pieces to small pieces, but they didn't take tons of artistic license in putting this together, as you can see, because they've left off major parts if you were trying to show a complete statue.
Yeah. They didn't make a fake head, which would have been a giveaway.
No, exactly. And since we're moving along swiftly, because this is first trip and part one, I do want to just plug the sort of second great museum that I'd recommend if you only have time for two museums. The Louvre is obviously going to be first, and then the second is the Musée d'Orsay. That's and I'll spell that out just in case you're trying to Google it and you're not a French speaker, as I'm not a French speaker. Musee and then d'Orsay. And the two famous things about this museum, it's on the regular tourist track. It'd be slightly less crowded than the Louvre, but still pretty darn crowded. Recommend booking beforehand. The Musée d'Orsay was a train station and was one of these wonderful, grand old European train stations. And we are extremely lucky that it was not torn down, because it came close. It was built in 1898, opened to the public in 1900, and functioned for some time, then kind of fell into disrepair. They almost tore it down. They talked about making it corporate offices, yada, yada. And then finally, it didn't become a museum, even though it's this epic landmark today. It didn't actually become a museum until 1986. So it's, it's recent compared to something like the Louvre.
Yeah. No, 1986. That's younger than us.
And while it does have a comprehensive collection, and it is more focused on painting and decorative arts than the sort of ancient art, the what you really come to the Musée d'Orsay for is not only to admire the architecture of the train station and how it's been transformed into a museum, but it's really for impressionists. The story of this collection is that much more literal, figurative, accurate to life style of painting, that realistic style of painting, switching to Impressionism. And this is where effects of light, dabs of painting, so that as you move back from a painting, the picture actually comes into focus. This is and sort of an explosion of color and creativity. This is the story of art in France between sort of 1848 to 1914. That was really the founding time period that this collection was focused on. And so you get a lot of you do get a sense of the realists. You have Manet, and then you do get a sense of the realist sort of painters, and then you move into the Impressionists, especially, the most famous. You have Monet, Renoir, etc. So really this French style that took the world by storm and transformed art thereafter.
I am such a Monet guy. I love Monet.
I think you have a T-shirt that says that, right?
Yeah.
I'm a Monet guy.
I'm not a Monet guy. I'm a Monet guy, and
you say it so naturally.
Thank you.
It's a great museum, especially if you're art minded. I mean, this has to be one of your great places, and even if you're not, certainly worth an hour and a half, 2 hours, just browsing the collection casually.
I love old train stations turned into museums. We talked about the one in Berlin. It's a theme.
So there's three more sites I want to make sure we get to today. Another is basically just a giant landmark like the Eiffel Tower, like the Seine, that is going to help you directionally and is worth taking a walk around, but it's not going to be a huge time suck, which is the Arc de Triomphe. This is the famous Victory Arch, the Triumphal Arch that was built in the early 1800s, completed in 1836. It is modeled after the great arches that the Roman emperors used to build in celebration of their conquerings. This one particularly was built, and you can do a little looking online to see the Arch of Titus in Rome. And it is completely covered in reliefs that celebrate sort of French warfare. And it was particularly dedicated for those who fought in the Napoleonic Wars. This is when, France was sort of that great world power and wanted to show it to the world. And
these
today,
are basically the last.
Proud.
These are like the last wars that France won.
Well, you could argue they won World War II, Ryan. They had a little help from their friends.
A little help, yeah.
We all need a little help from our friends.
Yeah.
And so this is a great patriotic place. It's not as iconic maybe as the Eiffel Tower, but certainly it is an icon of Paris, and you should make the time to visit. But won't be a huge time suck. You can walk around it in 20 minutes.
And I do like that in 1938, the architects in Mexico City said, "Let's make our monument to the Revolution just a little bit taller."
That's correct. You're right. It was, I believe, was it the largest arc before that was built?
Yeah, before that was built.
And have you visited that one?
Of course. That's right there. Yeah, it's hard to miss.
Well, and this is also hard to miss. Like if you're around Paris, you're going to come across this, which is why I'm calling it out as something to take in. And now I want to touch on two churches, Notre Dame Cathedral, of course, and then Sainte-Chapelle, which I was mentioning, which is a much smaller but similar, incredibly evocative space. And then I'm going to give you two off the beaten path places that I can't resist talking about, because I think that they should both be on any traveler's list. And then in the next one, God, I'm killing myself that I can't fit into this episode talking about the tomb of Napoleon, which is really something to see, but I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for part 2. Maybe we'll even do a little primer on Napoleon's life and impact on France, because I think when you're in Paris, you realize that is a very important history to really understand all of these grand monuments to the man.
I feel like I can get into my Napoleon phase in time for this,
Absolutely. I remember when I came back from Paris, I bought a door stopper of a biography of Napoleon.
I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
I was just like, there is no, I don't deserve to be back in this city until I've read this, because I don't know the impact this man had on French culture. And it really is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's important in like a global context, because, the story I love to tell is like, Simón Bolívar, he is literally there when Napoleon crowns himself, and it makes such an impression on him. He goes and takes over South America.
Oh my God. I actually did not know that Simón Bolívar was there.
He was there. He was a young man. He was in Europe on his tour, his grand tour. And he was obsessed with Napoleon.
Wow. And then he kind of made himself a Napoleon. But then he really fashioned himself more a champion of democracy, but with
by the end, both him and Napoleon, were corrupted by their power. Right?
Yeah, you've got to do that Bolivar episode. That's got to be coming. But that's going to have to be like a 5-part series.
I know.
So Notre Dame, what's very important too, and that maybe is underappreciated by most, is that, France was historically a Catholic country. And you don't feel it today like you do in Poland, where, a huge amount of the population is still Catholic, or in Ireland, where it's recent enough that it's kind of in the culture. But certainly when you're looking at these grand monuments, you can't understand the story of France without the story of Catholicism. And Notre Dame is one of the great cathedrals of the world. It is a medieval cathedral. It was built in 1163 is when they first started laying those first stones. And as you can imagine, it takes a while to build in the pre-modern era. And so it was finished, historians kind of can move this date a little bit, but around 1345. So I think that puts into perspective why it was so scary and devastating when it caught fire in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, this iconic building that's in literature and film, and it's part of the story of the West. It was just shocking to see it burn down.
And in preparation for this episode, I actually went back and was looking at some of the reporting on the fire while it was going on, and I actually thought the godfather of the podcast, Rick Steves, had a great perspective, which is basically, once it was clear that yes, the wooden roof, the medieval wooden roof, which was called the Forest because of its old timber, while that was lost to the fire, luckily so much was preserved. Many of the windows, the historic relics, and the stone of the building. The firefighters did such a good job, and the evacuation plan did such a good job of saving all these precious works that. And then the country poured huge resources into reopening the cathedral quickly, that he said, a century from now, people are going to read about the history of Notre Dame, and they're going to mention as a footnote that there was this minor fire in 2019. And I do think that we luckily can report today it is reopened, it is ready for visitors, and if anything, it is in better shape than it was beforehand, because a lot of those resources went to restoration and to cleaning. I mean, you can't overstate when you have centuries of candles burning in this old, drafty brick building that's exposed to the elements. These things over time can wear away and can deteriorate. And today Notre Dame is sparkling and clean, and they really have preserved so much of the history, but given it kind of this fresh cleanup. So it's a great time to go visit.
Yeah, I've never been inside. So I cannot wait to get to Paris and have a chance to see this restoration.
And, some of the things that are most notable about it, it's got 2 towers to the left and to the right. That's kind of the iconic silhouette. It's got the 3 entry doors. The Last Judgment portal is sort of the one where you want to take a look at the iconography that's above the door as you enter into the cathedral. And I always like Last Judgment scenes because they're always gory and creepy, and that's kind of fun. And inside, we should mention that Notre Dame means Our Lady. So this is dedicated to Mary. And there's several icons that you can visit throughout, most notably the supposed crown of thorns that Jesus actually wore is preserved there, and you can see it.
That is quite the, we always joke about some of the things that cathedrals have, like the toenail of Saint Pius III, but Jesus is the crown of thorns. That's for real. That's serious.
Yeah, the French loved gathering these relics, and I grew up with a priest who said, if you took all the original pieces of the cross that are out there and put them together, you'd have about 100 crosses. So. Are these
Jesus
the real
was
things?
Really big. That's what people don't know. He was huge.
He was a giant man, like 50 feet high. So the cross had to be very large. So the crown is the most important relic that's there. There's of course pieces of the cross, etc. And then the stained glass window, much of it's still the medieval windows that have been in that church for hundreds and hundreds of years and have now survived an epic fire. Also deserve your attention, and most notably, and this was maybe the piece that everyone was most worried about in the fire, is the rose window, which is this absolutely humongous grand circular window. And that's going to be something I do recommend if you have some flexibility in your schedule, trying to get there on a day when it is sunny. I know that sounds silly, but when you're trying to admire stained glass, you really do need it to be illuminated from the outside. Otherwise, you don't get the full effect. So if the sun comes out, try to be flexible and make your way to Notre Dame. And one of the things I love is that France has traditionally been committed, and still is, that visiting churches is free. So there's free entry. You should book ahead if you are able, but you can also go to mass. There's scheduled mass times. It's still an active religious site, and that's another way that you can get in and see the space.
Yeah, that's how that's how I usually end up at these churches. I end up going to mass.
You love a mass,
yeah.
And so, and by the way, I should have mentioned the architecture is Gothic architecture. And so, an emphasis on light is a big part of it, even though the technology had not gotten to a place where the the walls were minimized to make the windows larger. It does have two kind of architectural features that you should note. And I actually, if you have the chance, bring a pair of binoculars, because Notre Dame is famous for its gargoyles, the creepy creatures that they put up on the gutter system, and they call them gargoyles because the water can gargle in them when it rains.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
I don't know. Did you not know that?
I had no idea.
Is that a joke, or are you serious?
I'm being serious.
Well, that's why I included it. I was hoping to bring that knowledge. Yeah. So a gargoyle. There are
and
great
these are the
gargoyles.
ones that sing and dance with Quasimodo.
With Quasimodo, yes. I mean, that's why they're in the movie, because they're famous there, and they're super fun to look at. They're creepy and fun, and but they're way up on the rooftop. So a pair of binoculars, and you could even stand on the other side of the river and take a look at those. So the gargoyles on that side, and then it is also a church that the weight of these walls and windows required what's called flying buttresses, which are basically giant supports that come off the walls and then stand separate from the church building. So it just increases the scale, the footprint of these grand cathedrals, and you'll be able to study those from the outside.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna become obsessed with gargoyles, but they're supposed to remind you of the hell that await anyone who did not attend the church.
Of course, it's the sin on the outside.
So
of the
look
church,
at that gargoyle.
You
want to see that? You want to sit around with those things the rest of your days, or you want to go inside?
Based on the Disney classic, you could do worse.
Yeah. On the rose window, I wanted to say, I remember so vividly when the fire was happening in real time on Twitter. There was a tracking of the rose window. Is the fire at the rose window? Yes. Can we see the rose window? And when we found out the rose window was safe, there was a overwhelming joy. And so rarely is there joy on the internet.
I do feel like the world got very lucky. We've over time, and we have a couple episodes in the past about how that restoration happened, and we kind of tracked it in real time. So you can go back and listen to those episodes if you're interested in more of it. The next church that is very close by is called Sainte-Chapelle, and this was constructed around 1238, so similarly aged as Notre Dame, but it's a much smaller chapel, and I think it is more representative of Gothic architecture trying to emphasize light. So again, I'm going to say, if you can go on a sunny day, you should do it here, because the stained glass is the thing to see here. And sometimes we'll describe a church as a jewel box, but that is never more true than at Sainte-Chapelle, because if you get a sunny day in there, you are completely ensconced in these grand, huge, very tall windows. And because it's quite a intimate space, they were able to achieve that Gothic architecture dream of minimizing the wall space to emphasize the windows. And so there's 1,113 scenes in these stained glass windows. And what I always think about, I actually took a Gothic cathedrals class where we studied this way back when in undergrad. I had my art history requirement. And so, of course, I took the most Catholic one I could. And, these stained glass windows, you could almost think of them as like comic books, where when you had a largely illiterate peasantry who were growing up Catholic, but who were not going to be, reading the Bible themselves, they were receiving it through the clergy. This in particular was more of a royal space, but the whole idea behind stained glass windows is to create a literature that is shown, and that they could study and learn these stories and these morality tales without having to read. And truly, here in Sainte-Chapelle, it's getting to the point of grand art, but that is the whole idea behind stained glass, beyond just the beauty.
Yeah, the storytelling aspect, absolutely. I can only imagine how valuable it was for folks to kind of be able to see these folks they'd only heard about.
Yeah, and you can get a brochure there that shows you some of the highlights of the stories. So if you know your Bible stories, there's areas that are dedicated to the Old Testament, areas dedicated to the prophets, areas dedicated to the New Testament. I know I didn't have time time when I was there, and especially because I was there with other people who wouldn't want to nerd out this much on it. I've always dreamed about going back and really trying to follow the stories from old to new, which would take a very long time. But I love the level of detail that is preserved in this medieval glass.
Cool.
All right, Ryan, and I'm just going to plug with 3 sentences, 2 off the beaten path places. 1, whenever anyone who knows I have a travel podcast will ask me when they head to Paris, what should I do? And I always say, well, you already know all the big stuff that you want to do, but one of the lesser known non-tourist track things that I think, I don't know why this isn't on the main tourist path, is called the Promenade Plantée. And this is the original High Line. So everyone knows the High Line in New York. That's become a big part of the New York tourist track. But the original was actually built in the 1980s on an abandoned railway track raised up above the street level here in Paris. And it's a 3-mile walk that you can do. And what I love is it gives you a great view, unlike New York, where the buildings are towering above you. It gives you this great view of, this older city where you can actually see a lot of the crazy rooftops and awesome little chimneys with their chimney pots all throughout Paris. And so awesome views. It's planted just like on the High Line. It's got interesting artworks occasionally on it. And so this, if you're looking just to stretch your legs and get out of the museum and church space, definitely seek that out and take a walk through Paris that way.
That's awesome. I have not been there, and I love those things. So that will be top of my list.
And then here's a real nerdy one, which is this is close to the tourist path that you're going to be on. So I always just plug it because it'll make for great content and a great sort of 20 minutes exploration. There's a taxidermy shop that was founded in 1831 and has been in this shop space since 1881. It's called Deyrolle, Deyrolle. It's a good Instagram follow, and it is. It has that cabinet of curiosities feel, but it has preserved animals that, by the way, you can rent. So if you want to deck out your hotel room with a lion or an ostrich, you can rent them. It also sells taxidermy. So if you want an interesting keepsake, it was everything in me. And I actually kind of regret not buying some of these beautifully preserved beetles that they have under glass. This is a famous taxidermy shop, and it's museum worthy quality, but you can actually go and open drawers and admire them. So definitely recommend a trip to Deyrolle Taxidermy. And how did this get on my radar? Secret Paris from Jean Glay Publishing, my favorite guidebook series, has a great Paris edition.
Well, there'll be a link in the show notes. I think we've given people a lot to do on their first trip to Paris.
Absolutely. So I can't wait. I think we're going to try to do part 2 within the next month, probably, because we want to be able to give people the content they need for their summer trips. So we'll be back in Paris soon enough. But for now, Ryan, I would suggest that it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show. It's the final segment of the show. That's why it's called The Last Stop. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment, and it's popularly known as the people segment. That's because, famously a Big Tent podcast, we want everyone to feel that they have a space here, a space of community, which is here at The Last Stop, because it's all about sharing. It could be anything we share. It could be a piece of gear, an anecdote. It could be a dream. It could be an interesting interview, or it could even just be a picture that evokes something in you. But it has to meet one criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workday week. So, Ryan, here we're at the start of a workaday for sure. So I'm really hoping. Did you bring a last stop this week?
I did, Kiernan. This morning as I was getting up, get ready for the pod, reading the news, I read some sad news that Edmund White passed away yesterday.
I saw that. Yes.
Yeah. And Edmund White was a gay novelist. He was born in 1940 in Cincinnati, Ohio, and traveled the world, lived in Paris and lived in Italy, and wrote incredible novels. He wrote a novel called Nocturnes for the King of Naples about his time in Venice. He wrote a trilogy about being young and gay in America called that starts with A Boy's Own Story about his time in Ohio, and then ends with The Farewell Symphony, which takes place in New York. And he wrote an incredible memoir about being gay in New York in the 70s called City Boy. Anyway, he was a super cool guy. I never got to meet him. Already this morning, my friends and I have been texting each other because we've all been trying to get together with him.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's just, he's been old. And we didn't make it happen in time. But Edmund White, terrific American novelist, and wrote about the world. And I will link to some of my favorite books in the show notes.
I think of you as kind of the Edmund White of my friends, but without the writings.
Thank you. He was cool, he was a wild guy. I would definitely it's interesting because Edmund White was somebody I read at 18 and somebody that I've read in the last year. And there's very few people like that, I remember discovering him because when I was young and gay, there was when people talk about representation, these books didn't exist, and so this was can you believe this novel, A Boy's Own Story, exists?
Sure. So, yeah, it was very brave.
He was a cool guy. So Edmund White, 85 though, that's a life,
I think you and I are hoping for more like 100, 110.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get 150.
Yeah, Ryan and I are anti-pull the plug people. We've always said that. We bonded on that very early, which is if we can read the New York Times app, we keep us on.
Yeah, if I can do the Wordle with my eyes, keep me on. Did you bring a last stop this week?
I did. I'm in trip planning mode. I'm literally 2 days from Seattle, and I've been to Seattle 2 times before, and really love Seattle. Great food city, great drinking city, and it's reminded me of how valuable of a travel planning resource Eater is. I really like and trust Eater, it sort of rose with all of these online publications, kind of in the time of BuzzFeed and Gawker and all these things, but Eater has managed to stick around, and I still feel that their editorial content on specific cities' recommendations is solid. And so I've really appreciated, I've been reading, best sandwiches in Seattle, best breakfast sandwiches in Seattle, best breweries in Seattle, best restaurants in Seattle. And it has made me feel like I'm well prepared to make the most of my meals and my drinking time while there. So I'm already mapping out their proximity to the house we've rented. And I'm just grateful for that as a resource. We don't talk about it all that much here, but I give it the out of office approval. And I will say it makes me sad when I see some of the smaller Eater sites in second cities around the country starting to, it seems like they're starting to lose a little energy, and they put out these updates a little less frequently. And I really just hope Eater can pull through.
Yeah, one of my tips is to Google Eater in the city, because then it'll give you the list. And you can usually find they have what they call the essential restaurant list.
Exactly right. Yeah. It's always where I start. And then that's what I also like, is that if you have a particular interest, I really like exploring interesting takes on sandwiches. I work for a restaurant and sandwich making shop here in Boston. Our chain is sandwich focused, and so I always want to explore the food scene in that way.
Is it Clover?
I did. Thank you for mentioning it. Yes, it's Clover, an essential Boston institution.
Did you write a book?
Listen, I got a platform. What, am I not going to say it? You're just jealous you don't have a restaurant and a book.
It's true. I want a restaurant.
Ryan, on the next episode, I want to bring us back to Rome too. We know this is a major, major travel summer for people heading to Rome. You've just been there. I had, as people commented, a lot to say on Rome 1, but we didn't get to any of the off the beaten places, even some of the neighborhoods that we should have talked about in the first one we didn't have time for. So I'm going to say next episode, we're heading to Rome.
Let's go back to Rome. Until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken.
Ciao.
Do you attempt any French when you're in Paris?
Oh, no, I don't even.
No, I'm with you. I never would. I try to look like a dumb American, actually.